This is every single fight to make after UFC London Aspinall versus Tybura. I have all of the key fighters from that card on the screen right now. Some winners, some losers, and you may notice there is an empty box next to all of them, and that's where their next opponent's going to go, who I have hidden around the perimeter of the screen. I'll slowly reveal those opponents one by one as the video goes on and place them where they belong on the screen. Let's start straight away with the main event. Tom Aspinall versus Marcin Tybura. Now, Tom Aspinall made a call out after this fight and said that he wants to fight the winner of Gane versus Spivak, and then he wants to fight Jon Jones afterwards. Personally, I don't see the Jon Jones fight happening. I think Jon Jones is going to retire after his fight with Stipe Miocic. Maybe his ego and competitiveness will keep him around. I mean ego in a good way, by the way, because most fighters have it and you need it to be a good fighter. But either way, I don't see that Jones fight happening. I think Jones is going to be done after he defeats the consensus greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. And Tom Aspinall, other than that, called out the winner of Gane versus Spivak. I'm not interested in that. One, if Gane wins, he's probably going to take down Gane and beat him, okay? But Gane might win and look good in the grappling defense against Spivak, who knows? I don't want to see Gane right back into a title elimination bout after one win against Spivak. If Spivak wins, Aspinall's already beaten him. Sergey Pavlovich, the name that wasn't said. Maybe it's because he knows somewhat behind the scenes that maybe Sergey has been given like a short notice backup spot for the Jones versus Miocic fight, and he realizes that maybe he's not going to get that fight. And maybe if that is the case, they will just do him versus the winner of Gane versus Spivak, because in March, him versus Gane, UFC Fight Night London main event, will be a huge, huge matchup, because it just makes all the sense in the world. Guy from Paris, guy who's from the UK but can fight in London. I think it makes all the sense in the world, but I'm telling you, I'd rather see him versus Sergey Pavlovich. There's two ways you can do this fight. You can make this on the November MSG card, which is where Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic has taken place. And that way you can still have Sergey Pavlovich as the short notice backup opponent if anything goes wrong. But you can also have a massive heavyweight showcase on the last time that Jon Jones is going to be bringing that many eyes to the heavyweight division. Because let's be real, without Jones at heavyweight, there's not much views going into the heavyweight division. That's like, Cyril Gane's a big name, but he was a big name because he was taken on Ngannou, because he was taken on Jon Jones. I don't know if he carries that much value on his own. He is a big name, but I'm telling you, once Jon Jones leaves, there's going to be some dryness in the heavyweight division in terms of who's going to be the new big pay-per-view seller. So I think Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich. One, you get Pavlovich as maybe a short notice backup opponent. Two, it's a great matchup and it makes all the sense in the world. They're the two best heavyweights in the world, not named Jon Jones in my opinion. They're the two guys who have the best chance of beating Jon Jones right now in my opinion as well. And the winner of that one's going to have even more of a claim that maybe they could have beaten Jon Jones. So Tom Aspinall, Sergey Pavlovich, November MSG pay-per-view card, so that you can also say if Jon Jones, also you might get a backstage altercation, maybe they call him out on the microphone after a win and he's about to fight in a few fights' time, maybe they do it as like the feature fight or the main card opener, that could work. But if Jon Jones retires and everyone who watched Jon Jones is thinking, what about the winner of Aspinall Pavlovich? We just saw it on pay-per-view. The UFC is going to create a narrative that Jones left because he didn't want to fight the winner of Aspinall Pavlovich. I know it's not true. He probably would beat them, but that's what the UFC is going to do. That's what they always do. So I think put it on the MSG card. If not, put it on the December pay-per-view card. That way, Jones versus Miocic happens in November. If he does retire in November, immediately put the title on the line for Aspinall versus Pavlovich. Best of both worlds. One of those two options. We move on to the loser of the main event, Marcin Tybura. Easily smoked in the first round, but luckily for him, not a lot of damage. He got KO'd, I get it, but heavyweights get chinned. It's better than him going to war and taking a life-changing amount of damage. So I think Marcin Tybura is going to take a little bit of time off. A guy who recently got destroyed and might be coming back in December is Jairzinho Rozenstruik. As far as I'm aware, the fight has not happened yet. I don't think it has. So I'd like to see Marcin Tybura versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik somewhere on the main card of a fight night, maybe on the prelims of a pay-per-view. Marcin Tybura versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik is just a fight that hasn't happened yet. And a lot of times at heavyweight, you've already seen a lot of the fights. You know what I mean? So this is a good chance to use two fighters that haven't fought each other in a fresh matchup. Winner gets back on track. Loser probably goes home. We move on to the co-main event. Julia Stoliarenko armbarred Molly McCann in the first round with absolute ease. she's not going to get too much of a jump up the rankings because she is terrible. Like, that just goes to show how bad Molly McCann maybe is in her jiu-jitsu defense. Julia Stoliarenko won this fight, but like, this is her first. She was coming off a loss. I think she's 1-4 under the UFC promotion. Like, it's rough for her. So I feel like maybe you should put her against a women's fighter at women's flyweight who does have a bit of a name, Veronica Macedo. She has a name at women's flyweight. Although she's unranked, I think this is the perfect fight to sort of try and carry any kind of momentum you can with Julia Stoliarenko, because I think people are going to be more aware of her next fight than they were because she beat Molly McCann. So Julia Stoliarenko, Veronica Macedo, matchup to make in the women's flyweight division. November, October, December, any fight night card around the end of the year, the last quarter of the year. Sounds good to me. Molly McCann. I watched back the fight, she jumped herself into that armbar. So silly of her to do that. I don't understand why she did it. She was literally in a safe position to maybe stack over the top of Julia Stoliarenko and get onto like top position by sort of like getting her leg over the back of Julia Stoliarenko. But she did like this hip thing where she did like a front roll and rolled herself into the perfect position for an armbar. It was the worst mistake I've seen in a long time in jiu-jitsu. But Molly McCann is coming off a loss. I think she should take on Ivana Petrovic. I have her name up at the top of the screen so I can remember it. She's the very lowest ranked women's flyweight. Honestly, I was going to bring out the Bellator logo. I was. But then I realized the UFC might be buying Bellator. I could have pulled out the PFL logo. To be honest, I could have pulled out the Cage Warriors logo. That would have been even funnier. That's what my first thought was. But they're not going to cut her from the UFC. They're going to give her the easiest fight she can get. And Ivana Petrovic did not look good in her debut and lost to, I believe, Zara Fan dos Santos, who Molly McCann beat. So she's coming off a loss. She's 6-1. Molly McCann versus Ivana Petrovic. I'm forgetting her name every time I say it, but that's the matchup, I guess. Similar schedule. She just lost a couple of weeks ago. Molly McCann just lost. End of the year, December. Maybe when Paddy comes back on the December pay-per-view, Molly McCann can be the early prelim opener. No more co-main events, bitch. We move on. Nathaniel Wood clearly beats Andre Fili, and I'm glad people are starting to come around after rewatching the fight. Risky fight for him, though. He did get hurt badly in the second round, but recovered, and that's the main thing. Nathaniel Wood and Lerone Murphy, we're going to talk about both of these guys. I thought they were going to call out each other. I really thought Nathaniel Wood and Lerone Murphy, who both won, of course, Nathaniel Wood beat Fili, Murphy beat Kalibau and looked really good against Kalibau. I thought they were going to call out each other. They didn't. I don't think the UFC is going to make that matchup. And selfishly, I'll be honest with you guys, I think Wood needs a bit more time out than Murphy. Just going to say that. Secondly, so scheduling-wise, they don't quite match up. Secondly, selfishly, I want to see 3 UK featherweights in the top 15. If we can get 3 UK fighters in the top 15 of featherweight, one of the best divisions in the world, that says something, and I'm a patriot. So I want that. Nathaniel Wood, I think, should be looking to take on Alex Caceres, coming off a win over Daniel Pineda, who's not really a great named featherweight. He's known as a tough guy who's an exciting fighter, and he's known in the scene. But Alex Caceres just beat him in a war last month. So he's going to want some time off, much like Nathaniel Wood. The matchup I have for Lerone Murphy is Dan Ige, who might be willing to make a bit quicker of a turnaround than December at the end of the year. So I'm thinking Nathaniel Wood versus Alex Caceres in like the co-main event of an Apex fight night in December. And then we do Lerone Murphy versus Dan Ige in maybe like a... I don't think he's as big of a name, but that would be another matchup, maybe on the prelims of a pay-per-view, maybe the feature fight of a fight night card, maybe even a co-main event of an Apex fight night card as well. So that can happen a little bit earlier, though. Maybe even on the MSG pay-per-view card. Who knows? Because I feel like we're going to have to see Lerone Murphy. You're not going to get a ranked opponent to come fight you in the UK. You're going to have to go to the US to fight them. So I think Lerone Murphy, Dan Ige. Ige went to a scrappy fight with Nate Landwehr, but he didn't take much damage as Alex Caceres did in his last fight. So I think scheduling-wise, that makes sense a little bit more. Murphy versus Ige, he gets his ranked opponent in maybe October. And then we get, or maybe even November. Maybe October's too quick of a turnaround. November, Lerone Murphy versus Dan Ige. December, maybe final card of the year, Nathaniel Wood versus Alex Caceres. Both of them get ranked opponents. And then the beef's going to be really heated. When they're both ranked and both chasing down the belt, maybe then, when we come back to London in March of next year, after both of them potentially win at the end of the year. I'm not going to say that they do. These are tough matchups for them. If they both win at the end of the year, or even both lose, we can match them up together in the London card, either as a rebound matchup for both of them losing, or a real high-stakes contender matchup that's in a really good spot on the card at UFC London. That actually has some meaning because they're both ranked. That's what I think you should do with a pair of them, and that's what I would do. So Joel Alvarez beat Mark Jacasey. We're going to move on to him. Head clash. Didn't really take too much damage. He's Spanish. I'd like to see him against Elves Brenner. I'd love to see him against Elves Brenner. Maybe on the November card in Brazil. I think that would make some level of sense. So Joel Alvarez, Elves Brenner, Elves Alvarez. You know what I'm saying? That's not why I made the matchup, but I'm just thinking like, Joel Alvarez is pretty highly ranked because people forget he was on a bit of a streak. He was on a bit of a streak before he actually got beaten by Arman Sarukian, and he lost to Arman Sarukian, so it's not like a bad loss to have. Joel Alvarez, Elves Brenner. Elves Brenner just beat Goran Kutsteledze. He's known. Also, he's going to need some time off. So actually, he fought, I think, like a few weeks ago, went to a war with Goran. So he's going to need a few months off. So maybe even not November in Brazil. Maybe that's too wishful thinking. Maybe December, maybe even January in the new year, because they did both take some damage. Not so much Joel Alvarez, but he has a big weight cut, so I don't see him making a quick turnaround. And it was a clash of heads as well, so he's going to be a little bit rocked by it. So Joel Alvarez, Elves Brenner, make the fight happen. I think it'd be a good one. Give Elves Brenner enough time to recover so we can actually see the real version of him, though. I think that's a matchup that should be made. I think it makes sense. Similar schedules, similar positions in the rankings. Elves wasn't too highly ranked, but now he is. He's way high up there. I think he's like now top 25 or something. Joel Alvarez is top 20. So it makes sense to me. I think it's a good fight to make. We move on. Mick Parkin won on the prelims against Jamal Pogues. Looked pretty technically good. Nothing too amazing. Not too much athleticism. Not a crazy finish that everyone's hyped up about. But a somewhat skilled and composed heavyweight that clearly won a decision. Normally in heavyweight, decisions go to split decision. It's one of the most common split decision divisions there is, I feel like, in heavyweight, right? There's a lot of them. A lot of split decisions. So Mick Parkin versus Chris Barnett. Chris Barnett pulled out of a fight with Chase Sherman in April with an injury. So he's probably going to be recovered by now. And I'm thinking maybe we do, if Aspinall Pavlovich happens in November in MSG, Mick Parkin's his teammate, you put them on the prelims of MSG in November because you know Chris Barnett's going to liven up the crowd early on. So maybe on the early prelims of November MSG, you do Mick Parkin versus Jamal Pogues versus Chris Barnett. Sorry, you just fought Jamal Pogues. Mick Parkin versus Chris Barnett. Lively fight on the early prelims, and I think it'll be a good scrap between the two of them. And I think Chris Barnett would bring the excitement out of Mick Parkin, who maybe just didn't feel like he needed to kick it into second gear against Pogues because he was easily winning. I think that's the matchup to make it MSG. Makes all the sense in the world to me. We move on. Chris Duncan got a win against Yanal Ashmuz. Wasn't too impressed that he didn't get a finish against a one-armed opponent, but he still got a win. Someone who lost. They're on a similar schedule. They're both from a similar area. Duncan from Scotland, Jacasey from the UK, trains with Nathaniel Wood. Mark Jacasey. Mark Jacasey versus Chris Duncan. I said his name before I even brought him out. Chris Duncan versus Mark Jacasey. They're on similar schedules. They're from the same place. They're probably going to end up fighting in the same place if there is another card in Europe towards the end of the year. Who knows what's going to happen? I heard there was rumours of a Sweden card. Maybe it could be on there. Chris Duncan, Mark Jacasey. Interesting style matchup, interesting striking matchup, and I'd love to see it. So I think this is all the fights to make. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'm regretting I should have made the joke of bringing out the fucking Cage Warriors logo or something like that for Molly McCann. But either way, I think these make sense. I don't know. I don't want to see Aspinall wait until, what, March of next year to fight Garn versus Spivak. The winner of that, they're fighting at the end of September or early September. Either way, it's going to be a long wait. Keep momentum going. He just announced himself. He's back. He's got a ton of hype again. I want to see a fight signed in a month. In November in MSG. Or December. Maybe put the title on the line if Jones does retire in November. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.